Marge Piercy is an American poet, novelist, and social activist. Her writings weave themes of feminism, justice, and a Jewish ideal of tikkun olam, or repair of the world. Born in Detroit to a working-class family at the height of the Depression, today she still teaches poetry and remains active in anti-war, feminist, and environmental causes. UUs know the words of her poem to be of use as number 567 in our hymnal. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Today we share her poem from a 1983 anthology called Stone, Knife, Paper. The poem is titled The Annealing. We begin in a burning house. We begin by bandaging each other's wounds. We begin by holding each other in night, streaked by tracer bullets. I hike toward you with pain, riding my back like a grandfather, my blood burning its oil from the slaughtered leviathans of lost years. Collision of choice and accident. We are thrust at each other, abandoned animals who crawl into a culvert to share shelter and bodily warmth. With a stench of smoke, webs of soot in our hair, nonetheless we carry each embers of a hearth fire we lay together. In the ruins, we raise a new house. Round as a sleeping cat, and founded without evasion, without denial, on the bedrock of death.
Freedom and choice are concepts many Americans consider so much a part of our national identity that they may even feel entitled to them to some extent. With freedom comes the responsibility to consider consequences and behave in ways that do not cause harm. With choice comes the burden of choosing. Many today are lamenting that they didn't sign up for the situation, that they never would choose it. But we are deceived if we believe that choice has anything to do with it. The days we wake up despairing at what may seem yet another identical day in our imprisoned situation are the days the restlessness settles around us like a fog. The same foods, the same room, the same view, the same routine, and if we are among other people, perhaps the same conversation and the same argument over housework or money. Each of us may or may not have more opportunity for introspection, but we likely have multiple chances through the day to behave as the person we would like to be. When the introspection turns up the imperfections we'd rather not see, and our behaviors are not true to our ideals, it can be hard to be self-compassionate. Medical traditions acknowledge a process in healing called the Herxheimer reaction, in which symptoms worsen as healing begins to occur because of the extra garbage the body needs to process and release. Peculiarly, as any of you who have experienced the Herxheimer reaction can attest, one day the healing has progressed unnoticed past the acute discomfort. Wait, I feel better. I don't remember when I last felt pain. Maybe the mindset and discomfort that triggers our restlessness are like a mental and emotional Herxheimer. I believe some measure of restlessness is natural and is what keeps us from stagnating. But the excessive restlessness, the kind that can feel trapping or hopeless, may dissipate as we master our response. Overcoming the illusion of choice may be essential to finding peace and peace of mind during prolonged isolation. It may be helpful to acknowledge that even pre-pandemic, we had little more choice about the situations we find ourselves in. We can't control other people. We can't control the economy. We can't control time or the natural world. We can't even really control our own heart beating, our own lungs breathing, and our own brain thinking. What we can control is how we respond to the thoughts and feelings we experience and the actions of others. If we replace convictions about freedom and choice with contemplation on acceptance and determination to practice patience and kindness, we may find the way out of restlessness more often. Our healing journey requires patience, self-compassion, and 1,000 small corrections as we strive to show up as the person we wish to be. This is truly a spiritual practice. Part of my practice is to spend an hour each week reflecting on the work of the week and the ways in which I did and did not meet the expectations I set for myself. To be kind, to be connected, to seek simplicity, to be a leader and a healer. When I set these out for myself from a sickbed over the holidays, early COVID, I had no inkling that I'd have a whole new environment in which to practice. For me, the dramatically increased simplicity of the setting improves my ability to remain focused on my goals, even when distraction would be far preferable. One of my biggest challenges is to be patient and compassionate with myself, and the way this practice has unfolded gives me plenty of opportunity to practice. May we all find the fortitude and patience to undertake this work separately, but together.
Honey, I know you've been alone some. Why don't you phone some? 'Cause I love you. And honey, I know I've been away some. I've had to pay some, and you have too. But the one thing I know, that when I turn out the light, visions of you, dear, dance in the night. I've been put down, pushed around, apprehended and led downtown. I can't help it if I'm out of sight, 'cause I'm restless tonight. I just can't stand being alone. I'm gonna have to change that someday. Get a restless feeling in my bones, and I know that at times it just won't go away. So it's all the same, honey, I can't take the blame, baby, I can't play your game, honey. What's true is true. And if in the end the temptation wears you thin, honey, I'll just pretend that I'll leave it up to you. But one thing I know, that when I turn out the light, visions of you, dear, dance in the night. I've been put down, pushed around, apprehended and led downtown. And can't help it if I'm full of fire. But the one thing I know, that when I turn out the light, visions of you, dear, dance in the night. Been put down, pushed around, apprehended and led downtown. And can't help it if I'm out of sight, 'cause I'm restless tonight.
At the end of the 4th century of the Common Era, there were thousands of men and women living in gender-exclusive collectives of people, dedicating their lives to fasting, working, and worshiping. They're known as the Desert Mothers and Fathers, and they're still looked to as the mentors of modern-day intentional communities of religious life, the ones we often call monasteries and convents. Can you imagine what it was like for them living in Egypt in the early days of Christianity as the practices and rituals of the faith were still being formed? They woke up in their cells before dawn and began their days with scripture, song, and prayer in small sanctuaries with hard seating. Rows of pews faced each other so the monks could make sure they were all engaged. They committed themselves to praying throughout the day, during and in between the tasks they were assigned, as collectively they made products for the market like bread or jam or soap, or they grew lavender or nuts or olives, or they made some product to raise money to support themselves. In the heat of midday, they might not break for a meal because, after all, they were committed to fasting, but they might retreat right after communal prayer back to their cells where they would read scripture or commentary on Christian or communal life. Back and forth all day between work and prayer, fasting, the occasional meal taken in silence, all while wearing robes to the ground in that heat. It was a life of isolation, in the presence of other people committed to isolation. It was regimented in service to God and their spiritual well-being and humanity. And that life was best described by a desert monk named Evagrius, who was so familiar with the life, not just his life, but the life of all the desert mothers and fathers, that as a warning to himself and to them, he named 8 sins that they were all susceptible to, 8 ways in which they might not live their vows as fully as intended. Gluttony, fornication, avarice, sadness, anger, vainglory, and acedia. Now, you probably know that avarice is greed, a desire to hoard wealth in the form of money or goods. But you probably didn't know that acedia is described as laziness or indifference in religious or spiritual matters. Evagrius said that acedia, which he called the demon of noontide, would always be the last temptation to be conquered. And that makes sense to me, because if I had to conquer all those potential pitfalls, especially sadness, anger, and vainglory, all while being celibate and constantly fasting, I probably wouldn't have much enthusiasm left for anything spiritual. It would be a real struggle to see the hope and joy in life through all that regimented repetition and squelching perfectly natural emotions like sadness and anger. Evagrius's understanding of acedia was pretty simple. It was restlessness. In the throes of acedia, the monks would go back to their cells, not wanting to engage in the things they had dedicated their lives to. They'd fall asleep when they should have been praying or reading, and the sleep would be unrefreshing. It would leave them more listless, more agitated. And left unchecked, acedia could destroy their calling. Like so many ideas, the concept of acedia spread beyond the desert communities, and it was preached from pulpits across the world to lay people. It morphed into the sin we now call sloth. Just plain laziness. The idea of acedia lost its meaning in the common parlance, which shouldn't be surprising considering Pope Gregory. Think Gregorian chants and the mission to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. Didn't think that acedia was that big an issue for lay people who didn't have the same kinds of commitments, the same kinds of regimented lives that the cloistered monks and nuns had. He was probably right. I mean, ancient farm life to our modern eyes may look as tedious and boring as monastic life with our technology and mobility. In our modern world, the people who are most likely to lack that kind of access to enjoyable diversions are people who are incarcerated or people living in skilled nursing facilities. I've witnessed the kind of restlessness Evagrius described in some skilled nursing facilities. People living regimented lives, being told when to eat, sleep, and bathe, where to spend their free time, and being expected to find inspiration or entertainment where it might not exist for them. Often, fatigue is the result of a lack of activity, and sleep only makes things worse. So they can become agitated. And agitation is an extreme form of restlessness. It's restlessness that grows beyond fidgetiness and disinterest into lashing out. Agitation is common among those who are very close to the end of life, so common that they are predictable patterns of behavior that the staff of skilled nursing facilities are trained to recognize and deal with before they progress to the point of requiring restraint or sedation. And nobody wants to restrain or sedate another human being. One study I read in the journals of gerontology on agitation in residents of skilled nursing facilities, people on the spectrum between vigor and near death, described the charged emotional state as resulting from an incongruent person-environment fit. After tests in multiple locations, witnessing thousands of patients in a variety of skilled nursing facilities, they concluded that variations such as age, gender, hearing impairment, and cognitive status are independent predictors of agitation, so insignificant they were only noticed when measured using the tools of psychology. To use layman's words, when we feel stuck where we don't want to be, having little or no choice about how we spend our time, regardless of our age, gender, or abilities, at some point we get agitated. We are going to be in an extreme state of restlessness where sleep only makes things worse, where we have a hard time remembering what is really important, like the goals and commitments of our lives. Everything starts to lose value. We lash out at the sheets on our beds, the food on our plates, and the people we think are causing us all the discomfort. Sound familiar? We're seeing a lot of extreme restlessness lately. We're all living lives of monastic isolation that we didn't choose. It seems nearly everyone is experiencing, to some degree, the emotion that Evagrius called acedia. I know I flirted with a monastic style acedia on Wednesday. I woke up before the crack of dawn for prayer circle. I forgot to have breakfast. Then I ran over to the beacon to water the plants and check on the facilities. I came back home and hosted beverages and banter, then went outside and mowed the lawn in the blistering heat. I came back in sweaty and dirty and ate a bland lunch of beans and produce that was about to turn, then settled into reading Christian apology and a very dry medical journal article. No offense, Dr. Vance. Of course, this is in the context of being stuck at home for 2.5 months, where my big weekly outing is watering plants. I was tempted to succumb to the demon of noontide, but I knew that if I slept, I'd wake up grumpier, less rested, and less willing to do the reading. So I did the reading and actually found myself engaged. I narrowly avoided the sin of acedia for the moment. And like sadness or anger, the problem isn't feeling acedia. The problem is when we don't have the drive or the interest to find a way out. The sin isn't feeling angry or sad or restless. We miss the mark when we act on those feelings. We miss the mark when we're not in relationship with ourselves and others in the way that we want to be. A lot of us are at risk of slipping into acedia if we haven't already. We're at risk of ignoring or avoiding our spirituality. our practice of tending to the interconnected web of all existence. We're at risk of forgetting that with our rights as individuals come responsibilities to everyone and everything else in the web. Some of us are already lashing out, tired of being stuck where we don't want to be and ignoring our responsibilities to others. As we face reopening the economy and deciding when we as a congregation will resume in-person services and gatherings, we have to be mindful that we can't fall into a kind of collective acedia and forget our commitments. We must remain cognizant that some of us are suffering, and suffering profoundly. Some are physically craving human contact. Some are exhausted from lives on hold where every day feels like Blur's day, or are worried about our family's financial well-being. And some are afraid of this virus and the very real possibility that we could get deathly ill if we're exposed. With all of these extreme feelings, compounded by extreme restlessness from being stuck in a situation none of us signed up for, it's going to be increasingly important that we make the choice to not fall to the sin of acedia. I have a feeling that reopening is a kind of healing. And my feeling is that we're going to experience a kind of global Herxheimer reaction. The symptoms of all this isolation, restlessness, agitation, even acedia, are going to seem to get worse before they get any better. And maybe we can see this reopening process as an annealing that strengthens us through pressure and even a little heat. It's especially important that we each make the choice to keep tending to our responsibilities to the interconnected web and make decisions that serve not just ourselves, but the greatest number of people possible. It's the only way we're going to survive.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah, yeah,
Something amazing happened recently that I want to share with you. When I learned that the U.S. Treasury would be sending checks to qualifying households as a form of stimulus and relief, I issued a challenge to you all. I asked that everyone who felt financially secure donate all or part of that check to the minister's discretionary fund so that I can quickly help those whose needs were not completely covered by the Treasury checks, or those who didn't get a check at all. And I promised that I would do the same, and I did. Well, a lot of you responded, and I already sent out thank you notes, but I want to say it here. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity in helping our members and friends who are facing job loss or a decrease in income. And for those of you in need, please contact me directly so I can get money to you as soon as possible. I also want to take this time to remind you to send in your checks to fulfill your pledges. We are surviving this hardship, this time of incredible challenge, because of your commitment to our mission to love, revere, discover, and connect. Not just amongst ourselves, but with the wider community. Thank you for being here with us today and for everything that you do. I'd like to share with you as a benediction this morning, a blessing as we go on our way, a slight modification of a document that comes from Pikes Peak Hospice and Palliative Care in Colorado Springs. It's called Managing Restlessness and Agitation, and it's so packed with compassion and so useful in its suggestions that it reads like a blessing. Resist the temptation to control the behavior of others. Set limits kindly. Keep tasks simple. Create daily routines and small rituals. Try not to do too little or too much. nurture good habits and positive memories, and take care of yourself so that you may take care of others and be a force of love and healing.
We join hands in the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, pledging ourselves to an individual religious freedom which transcends all creeds, not to think alike, but to journey together.